The rain had just stopped when the first settlers saw the canoes pushing across the Mississippi. Evening light lay low over the water, and the riverbank at Rock Island seemed quiet enough that children were still playing near the cabins. Then someone shouted that Indians were coming, and every head turned toward the dark shapes sliding out of the mist. They weren't raiders slipping in for a quick strike. They were families. Men, women, and children from Black Hawk's band of Sauk and Meskwaki, their canoes loaded with bundles and kettles. They crossed in a long, ragged line toward the fields and village sites they had known all their lives on the Illinois side, where fences and cabins now marked land that had once been theirs. For decades, the Sauk village of Saukenuk had been the center of Black Hawk's world. Cornfields ringed the lodges, burial grounds held their dead treaties, and land sales signed by other chiefs under pressure had pushed many Sauk west. But each spring, Black Hawk's band returned to plant and harvest on the Rock River. In 1832, he came back again, convinced he could reclaim at least a slice of what had been taken. American officials saw something very different. To them, the crossing in April looked like an armed invasion. They pointed to the disputed 1804 treaty, signed in St. Louis by a handful of chiefs who believed they were agreeing to peace, not selling a homeland, and insisted the Sauk had parted with their lands for a fraction of their value. Black Hawk had never accepted that paper. Now, about 65 years old, he was leading several hundred followers back across the river, joined by a few Kickapoo and Potawatomi allies, hoping for British support that no longer existed. The settlers responded with fear. Stories raced along the frontier about Black Hawk's band, that the warriors were painted for war, that they had pledged to burn cabins and scalp families. Territorial Governor John Reynolds sent urgent messages to Washington and called out Illinois militia companies. Many of the volunteers had little training and even less discipline, but they brought rifles and a hunger to prove themselves. Black Hawk, camped along the Rock River, tried to feel out his options. He sent envoys to nearby villages, looking for food and allies. The answers were slow and uncertain. Meanwhile, more militia gathered to push him out. The first clash came not from a planned battle, but from panic. In May, at a place called Stillman's Run, a small detachment of militia rode out from their camp to meet what they thought were surrendering envoys. The Sauk advance party had come under a white flag to talk. Nervous militiamen fired on them anyway. Several were killed as they turned to retreat. When Black Hawk heard the shots, he believed he was under attack. With fewer than 50 warriors ready at his side, he used ravines, brush, and a low ridge to ambush the pursuing militia. The volunteers broke almost immediately. Men scrambled for their horses, threw down weapons, and fled back toward their camp, leaving bodies in the grass. 13 militia were killed. Black Hawk lost only a few men. News of Stillman's Run spread, but the details changed with each telling. In farmhouses and taverns, the story became a narrow escape from total slaughter. Many insisted that hundreds of warriors had descended on brave citizen soldiers. The broken retreat turned into a rallying cry. More volunteers poured into the field, and regular U.S. Army units moved toward the Rock River to join them. For Black Hawk, the victory was hollow. He knew he had guaranteed a larger war he could not win. His band had limited food, few horses, and elders and children who could not move fast. As American forces tightened their lines, he led his people north and west through river country, trying to find safety among Ho-Chunk villages and always staying ahead of the columns marching after him. The campaign that followed was a relentless chase through prairies, swamps, and timber. Militia companies burned abandoned Sauk villages. Scouts reported seeing small groups slipping through the trees, but when soldiers charged, they usually found only empty campfires and broken kettles. Hunger and sickness stalked Black Hawk's people. Women dug for roots, while children cried for food. American commanders maneuvered troops through the tangled country, artillery pieces bogged down in marshes, Supply wagons struggled over muddy tracks, yet the weight of numbers was impossible to escape. Black Hawk had a few hundred people. The United States could call on thousands. By midsummer, Black Hawk's band was starving. He tried to move his people toward the Wisconsin River, hoping to cross and slip north, but militia intercepted boats and cut off routes. Skirmishes flared along the way, sharpshooters behind trees, quick rushes across open ground, but the Sauk leadership focused less on striking back and more on keeping families moving. The breaking point came in early August on the banks of the Mississippi, near a place called Bad Axe. Black Hawk's people had reached the river at last. On the far side lay the Iowa country and a chance, however slim, at escape. They built makeshift rafts from logs and canoes and began ferrying women and children into the current. An armed steamboat, the Warrior, spotted the band along the shore. Through an interpreter, officers demanded that the Sauk surrender. Accounts differ on exactly what was said next. Some witnesses claimed Black Hawk tried again to raise a white flag. Men aboard the Warrior, convinced they were under fire, opened up with a 6-pound cannon and musket volleys. The riverbank erupted. Shrapnel and rifle balls tore through the crowded camp. People ran for the water, diving behind rocks or into the shallows. Some tried to swim for the Iowa side and were gunned down midstream. Others clung to rafts that splintered under the blasts. When the shooting stopped at dusk, the Warrior pulled away, planning to return in the morning. At dawn, militia and regular troops attacked from the land side while the steamboat came back to rake the shore. What followed was less a battle than a killing ground. Warriors fought from behind logs and in the underbrush, trying to hold off the attackers long enough for a few more people to reach the river. Many of those in the water never made it across. Soldiers later reported shooting at figures clinging to driftwood and at swimmers whose heads bobbed just above the surface. By the end of the day, bodies lined the shore and floated downstream. Estimates vary, but well over 100 Sauk and Meskwaki were killed at Bad Axe, including many women and children. American forces lost only a handful of men. Others spoke of a clean victory. Black Hawk himself slipped away before the final slaughter, guided inland by a small group of followers. Exhausted and hunted, he surrendered weeks later after Ho-Chunk leaders, under pressure from U.S. officials, turned him over. Taken east in chains, he became a curiosity in eastern cities, paraded before crowds who stared at the defeated chief whose name had filled newspapers all summer. In his dictated autobiography, Black Hawk described his decision to return to Illinois as an attempt to reclaim his home, not to conquer anyone else's. He spoke of graves left behind and fields taken over by strangers. None of that changed the outcome. His band was shattered. Survivors were pushed west of the Mississippi for good. On the ground where Saukenuk once stood, plows cut through cornfields that no longer belonged to the Sauk. Cabins rose where lodges had been. The Black Hawk War became a brief entry in frontier histories. For the Sauk and Meskwaki, it marked the end of a homeland on the Rock River and the beginning of a long exile. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier